Okay, so what are we talking about? What's this video about? As I said, right, as in the title, right, it's about what is meaning. What is meaning? I think there's a lot of talk about how to find meaning. A lot of people talk about, oh, you need to meditate, do all these stuff. But I think, first of all, we need to understand this fundamental question: what is meaning? Um, I was sort of driven to make this video to talk about this because I saw a video of Alex O'Connor and John Vervaeke. John Vervaeke, one of the greatest cognitive scientists and philosophers of our time, right? But Alex O'Connor talked about um, this episode in Blaise Pascal's Ponce, where he talks about this guy who's bored and who cures his boredom by gambling, right? And Pascal makes this observation that if you take away, if you take away this guy's ability to gamble, he'll be bored, obviously, right? But also, if you take away the ability, or if you give him rather all of the money he could ever win gambling, he would also be bored, right? Then it would be meaningless for him. If you made it so that every time he gambled, he didn't win anything, then it would also be meaningless, right? Because there's nothing, no possibility of gain. So he came to the conclusion that meaning then was something like a continuous search for something you can never attain, right? This continual grasping. I think to some extent this is true. I think it's arriving at part of a truth, in the sense that we can never understand, as we say, the logos, right? You cannot fully understand the logos, and I believe wholeheartedly that our world is not um, fine doesn't have a finite amount of intelligibility, right? We so the point being, we can never exhaust the amount of intelligibility, the amount of meaning we can find in our world, the amount of reason we can find in our world. We can always understand things new and understand things in more ways. Back to this question though, what is meaning, right? You can say it's, well, truly what it is why we get up, why we feel the reason to live. Why would we endure the slings and arrows of this life, right? Why do we do this? And it can be broken up into three reasons, right? So this meaning not the meaning of life, but meaning in life, the meaning I find in life, is found, is the reason I continue to wake up and go after the day. But that meaning that I find can be broken up into three parts. The first part is that this thing has to be important, right? And now we say, okay, what does that mean? Importance is a subjective idea, right? It doesn't mean objectively important. It doesn't mean that it's important to everybody. It means it's important to me. It means that I believe it is important, right? And I think this goes to one key issue, and I think all three of these points will point to key issues with Alex O'Connor's idea of meaning, right? Is it important that this person win money, right? This guy who's going to this casino wins money? No, it's not important that he does that. How is it important that he wins money? You could say, oh, it's important because maybe he has some other motivation, right? Maybe his child is sick. Well, then his meaning in life is not going to the casino. His meaning in life is helping his sick child, right? And so I think that is a key understanding, right? He does not believe that this is important. He does not believe that this is that going to the casino is important, and that's a very important key for us to believe that we have meaning, or to find our meaning, is for something to be important. It doesn't mean objectively important. It means up to the limit of our cognition it is important, or at least up to what we perceive it is important. And that's where both introspection, meditation, right, trying to look objectively, as well as look at understanding what subjectively I believe and why do I believe in all these things, right? Looking through the world in these lenses is very important when we think about meaning, right? So when you're deciding, it's the same thing of like, what do I do with my life? When you're trying to figure this out, you need to be very careful. You want to be very introspective. You want to be very objective as much as you can, so that you have a clear picture as to, so this is as strong as it can be, because if you find flaws in it, then it can't be your meaning, because it's not the most important thing, right? So if in comparison this thing is more important to you, right? It's not objectively more important to you. Is if this other thing is more important, then that other thing is always going to take precedence over this less important thing, and so it's always important that we make sure we understand and rationally understand the importance of what we decide is our meaning, or what we think our meaning is. Often we think we have meaning in life, when in reality we don't. We just have this thing that we're after. I think this is, again, something which can kind of be illustrated by this guy who keeps gambling. He thinks it's important, right? In his sort of willing disillusion. I don't believe, obviously it could be some other situation, but I think the situation he's describing more broadly, most likely, is that this person who's going gambling knows deep in their mind, right? They know, or logically at least, that doing this is not important, that it doesn't matter, and yet because of some need association with happiness that is created, right? He has this dopamine hit, dopaminergic hit every time he does win any amount of money, and so he's not actually, he knows it's not important, but he can't stop himself from doing it because he's continued to increase the amount of dopamine he's getting, and so that feels good, but he knows it's not important. Okay, the second point, I realize I may have equivocated on that a little too long, but the second point is it has to be real. And again, I think this brings up another flaw in Alex O'Connor's argument, right? Is it doesn't have, he knows, the person who's going gambling knows that it's not real. They know very clearly, that the importance they're making, the importance they're putting on gambling, right, is not real. Is not having, it's not a real tangible thing. So what do I mean by this? I mean, they're going to the casino, right? And they know this is not really making them happy. They also know this is not really progressing towards any goal. They know it's not a real thing to find meaning in. So, I guess an example of this, right, maybe obvious example, would be people who find meaning in video games, right? I find meaning in leveling up in this video game, becoming better. Okay. If that is your goal, if that is your meaning, if you feel like that is your meaning, right, it can feel important. It can certainly feel important, but you know it's not real. And I think it goes to the question of, like, why would you, would you want to know if your partner was cheating on you, right? And most people would say, of course I would want to know if my partner was cheating on me, of course. And why would you care? Why would you then care? Right, and then I ask you, like, if the relationship's going well, right, if, everything, you're happy, why would you want to know? Because it's not real, right? Because then she's lying to me, or he's lying to me, right? Then it's not real. You see how we have this need and this desire, and it's a real and it's a important desire, that what we care about is a real thing. That's why when you see somebody who feels like video games have all this importance and meaning, because subjectively to them maybe it does have importance, but they know it's not real, or hopefully they know it's not real, but looking at them, seeing them go through this where they're so invested in this thing, it's not real. And so that's why you look at this person and you say, what are they doing? This isn't real meaning, right? And this brings up a good point, is that a good way to figure out, to try to understand your own meaning, understand if this is right, if this is real, right? Because you're saying, well, I'm a subjective person, I see the world subjectively. How am I with subjective, worldview, with a subjective worldview, going to see the truth? Well, one way on your own is to try to look at your life objectively, to meditate objectively, to try to remove your bias. Another way is just to talk to other people. They know, right? They can see, just as you can see that the person finding meaning in video games, you can tell that that's not real. Somebody else can tell that in your life, what you find meaningful isn't real either, right? And so that Socratic dialogue, that understanding more of this logos, of this meaning, is very important. Okay, the last thing is how do I find meaning in my life? What is that meaning? I can't tell you what that meaning is for you, obviously, but what's the last aspect of this meaning? It is what is affecting it. It is that I am doing something to affect it now, right? Okay, so maybe let's say I'm this person who living in this world right now. Cool, great. I think that climate change is the most important issue, right? I think it's an existential threat. I think we're all gonna die. Okay, it's important. Boom. Do I think it's real? Well, I think a lot of scientists agree it's real, so I think it's real. I know it's real. Okay. That doesn't give me meaning, right? Those two things don't mean I have meaning in life. But then the question is, what am I doing about it? Well, if I'm a cashier at a grocery store, and I'm, giving people plastic bags, well, then maybe I'm not even positively affecting it. Maybe I'm negatively affecting it. Well, then that's terrible, right? And so it's not that we even have to change it. It's not that we have to find a solution. It's not that we have to do these things. No, we have to solve it. It's not about solving problems. It's not about ending this thing. It's about improving it in some way, finding some way to affect it in a positive way. And so that cashier can still be a cashier, right? You can still be a cashier, but if you then on your some of your free time, you go to these rallies or protests about climate change. Maybe you try to get more educated about climate change because you think it's important, right? You know it's important, and if you really think it's the most important thing, then you're going to be willing, of course, to give more time to it. And the only thing holding you back would be some emotional associations you have, and other issues which you hopefully should resolve, which I would presume would be affecting you in other negative ways throughout your life, right? It would be something like an association with not working as hard at your job, maybe because your parents instilled this idea and were very forceful with this idea of working hard all the time, and you think that means always spending 50 hours a week at your job, and so hopefully understanding and resolving that issue, that would be what would be stopping you from doing more. So again, three parts of meaning. Hopefully in the future we can reduce it even further, but at least for now there are 3 parts. Important. Boom. Is this important? Does this matter? Even it's not just does this matter, right? Subjectively, is this the most important thing to me? Right? And you can balance it with these other things, right? Maybe I think climate change is the most important, but I can't affect it. I can't do anything about it, or I feel that I can't do anything about it, but I know I can do something about this other issue, which I feel like is almost equally important, right? And so maybe it doesn't have to be the maximally important thing, but it has to be very important to you. It has to be important to you. You have to have, and you have to then also have these other things, right? You have to believe it's real. And again, it's not a truth that it's real. We can't know. Knowing things are real. Well, maybe we can know some things are real, but it's very difficult to know unequivocally that this is real. It's difficult to unequivocally know that climate change is real without a doubt, right? So don't look for that. But try to make sure that, to the best of your knowledge, and again, talking to other people, the knowledge of those around you, the knowledge of those on the internet, right? To their knowledge, it's true, right? And then I'm like, okay, through conversation, through other opinions, I've realized it's true, right? I listen to somebody who says climate change is not real, and I think they're a little stupid. And so I believe it's real. Last thing, I have to be affecting it, right? What am I doing about it now? That's how I actually feel meaning in my life. That's why I'm waking up. It would be actually adverse to you if you had the first two. If you think something's super important, you think it's really real, you think it's hurting people, and then I'm not doing anything about it. That's a lot of why a lot of people have this depression, or have depression, right? You feel something super important. You feel like it's very real, and yet you aren't doing something about it. There's this feeling of lacking ability almost, and then it can perpetuate itself. And so so it's important to just do something now, and try to always see, okay, how can I move forward in this, right? Okay, so how do we find it? So how like, right? How do you find meaning then? Well, from my conception, I can't speak again of objectively true ways of finding meaning, but what I would say is that you want to look at your life, ask yourself, who am I, right? What do I know? What am I good at? What do I understand? What matters to me? Because however much we think, climate change is important, it's not just, importance just isn't just to everybody. It's important to me. Important to me. Don't base your life on objective, on trying to be doing the thing that everybody, like, the average person would think is most important. You can't do that. Obviously you want to try to temper your own opinions with other contradictory or other people's perspectives, right? But don't try to be just average human. What do they think is most important, right? What do most people vote is important? No. What's important to me, right? What's important to me, right? The question I think John Vervaeke asked is, what would you want to exist even if you didn't? What would you want to exist even if you didn't, right? What do you feel like is most important? And so, again, so I may be saying, in relation to me, what I mean is from my perspective, right? From my perspective, not like the most important thing to me is eating food or something like that. It's like, to me, the most important thing for all of us is learning or something like that. How can I promote this learning or this type of learning? I want to be clear about that. So we look at our life. I ask, well, what am I? Am I a math guy? I'm not. I'll tell you straight up, I'm not a math guy. I'm not a super sciencey guy. I like some science, but I'm not. I'm not a chemist. Certainly, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. So you look at the things you like. You have a calling too. I believe in each of us there is something that is fundamentally different. This is the idea of Darwinian evolution, right? We are not all the same, and we are all different in different ways, right? We all have the same core. In fact, when there's variation in this core, it self-corrects, right? The core human being, right? So when some genes are altered, right? Like, I'm not going to go exactly into, because I'm, again, not a sciencey guy, but when some genes are altered about fundamental parts of us, the system self-corrects. And so we don't have, some people do, obviously, but most human beings don't have, what's different about us is not something, and the only thing that's different about us is not something fundamental, like I'm missing a limb, or I don't have fingers, or I have some cognitive impairment, which significantly impairs my ability to think or something. For us, it's all different in ways that are almost imperceptible, but ways which have colored our perception of the world, right? Perception of this upbringing. We also have these different upbringings. And I think this is where the evolution is not just genetic, but it's also social. As we evolve socially, you're in a new situation. You're in a different situation than I am. Even if we were the same person, we would be different people because we were brought up in different situations, right? It's not just nature. It's not just nurture. It's both. They both intertwine to make a wholly unique person. So you are wholly unique in your perspective, right? You're not wholly unique in your genes. You're not wholly unique in every part of you. But what you are wholly unique in is the way, well, to say wholly, I guess not objectively wholly, but whole. Not all of your beliefs are completely different from mine, but you do see the world in a different way than I do. That's true. That's a fact. You see the world differently than I do. And so we want to understand, what is my perspective? What do I believe about the world? What do I think about the world? Okay. And then what can I do to help the world evolve? What can I help to move the world forward? That's what we got to be asking to find this meaning. Right? It's what's important, as in what's important to the world, but also what's important to me in relation to the world, right? What can I do? So I'll take myself, because I think this is a pertinent point. That may need some slight right. I understand from a young age other people very well, right? Another thing, though, my mom is she has a master's degree in English, so I grew up around a lot of literature about Dante's Inferno and Shakespeare and all these things. And so those two ideas, as well as hundreds of other experiences, have helped shape me and shape the way I see the world, right? Both my predisposition to understanding people, how they act, and my relation to literature as I grew up. So, what has that made me? Somebody who is philosophically inclined, I think, psychologically to some extent, and someone who sees the world in that perspective. Okay, well, I know this is what I'm better at than the other things, right? I'm better at this than math. I'm better at this than a lot of, science or racing a car or doing something, doing whatever you may pull out of a hat, right? And so I need to find a way in which this thing I'm good at, this thing that I can affect, can help the world as a whole, and a way that can help the world that is real, that is an actual effect of the world, right? It needs to be important, right? It needs to matter to the world. So something that's actually important in relation to myself, in the sense that I need to have some understanding, be able to affect it, but also important to a global world of people, right? Or at least my community of people, the people I understand, the people I can empathize and understand and care about, right? And it has to be something that's real. I don't want to come up with a way of thinking wholly based on that 2 plus 2 is 5, right? I don't want to come up with a whole theory of the world that's based on this not real idea. So, I want to say clearly, I'm struggling with this too. I think I have some ideas of what that could be, but I think that is how we find our meaning, at least part of the way we find our meaning, right? I think this is also goes with the idea expressed in a previous video of the fact that we, as human beings, we think we only have the 4 key desires, 4 key base instincts: food, water, shelter, and sexy time, right? Or having children. Sorry, that was a little joke for the kids, but sorry, that's not that funny. I know that's not that funny, but I'm tired, a little bit. So we think we have these 4 key desires, but as I talked about in a previous video, I truly believe we have a desire as well, which is not derived from our desire to continue to live. It's not like it's not a desire expanded from these 4 ideas. It's a wholly independent one. That we have a desire to have, I guess, maybe saying to have meaning is sort of superfluous, but to affect something real. We have this desire to help the world in some way, to affect other people. I think we see this in ourselves all the time. We want to help other people. We want to do something that matters to other people too. It's not just about me. It's about other people too. And so I think that core desire is at the base of meaning. Because these things, these 4 things, right? Food, water, shelter, having children, we got those pretty well taken care of. You know, go to Tinder if you really want to have some kids, right? You want to find some people. Food, water, shelter. If you live in a first world country, you're chill. I mean, even, well, second world means it's not sort of a reduced term at this point. But like, even if you live in Russia, it's not like these are wholly foreign ideas. And you for the most part have these things satisfied. So most of the world has these four key things satisfied. And so we still have this one desire which we don't have satisfied, and I think that's what we see in a meaning crisis. The meaning crisis I think we're all going through to some extent, through the world is going through, is that we don't have this thing where we're impacting something real that helps the world, right? That helps the world. And I think that's why we see a lot of student activism. Not that I'm certainly not against student activism. I think it's great. I think it makes sense, right? But certainly in relating to topics like to complex topics, I should say, right? Like the Gaza Israeli war, whatever you want to call it, Palestine, Israel, war, I don't know, conflict. People call it a lot of different things, but there's a lot of protests about it, right? And yet it's a wholly complex issue, and yet they just say, from the river to the sea, or something like that, right? Because that's how they find meaning, and they latch on to it, and they're able to suspend realness. They're able to suspend. It's not a wholly to suspend realness, but to be okay with seeing realness only through the conversations you've had with these people around you, right? You're in a situation where everybody around you is saying the same thing, and so it becomes more real, and yet you sort of silence this small part of you, which is saying, what about all these other, why, all these other questions, because you're so drawn to this thing that is important and that you can affect. I can affect it, I can do a protest, and it's important. Look, people are dying. And so, instead of thinking so deeper about it, we just go straight into it. And we're like, hell yeah, of course. Instead of talking to other people who are trying to understand the issue wholly. And I think the reason this grips us so much is because of the meaning crisis. Because we don't have other meaning, right? Why would... Right, if we look back in history, protests on student campuses were about things which were far more, arguably far more important and far more real. Far more real, certainly. In pro-free speech protests at Berkeley or civil rights movement protests, these were far more real, and I would argue far more important. And they affected it in a far more real way. And so before, it took something so unequivocally real, so logically real, again, unequivocally important, as well as something you could really affect in a strong way to get people to protest in this way. And now all it takes, I don't want to minimize it, but what it takes is something which is foreign. So, not to say foreign things aren't important, but to me, they're less important. To you, they're less important, because they don't affect you. So, from our subjective point of view, they're less important. Um, they're also less real in the sense that what I'm doing is, or the way I'm conceiving of it, is not as real. It's a very complex issue. It's also one in which, if you just say Israel bad, right, then, or you're from the river to the sea, right, if you just chant that, um, that's not very real. Um, unless you truly believe, Israel shouldn't exist or something like that, which I guess, I'm happy for you to believe, but I don't. These people don't actually wholly believe that. They don't believe Israel shouldn't exist, and yet they chant these things, talking about Israel not existing. So it's not very real for them. If they thought about it more and conversed with opposing opinions more, and then also, are they affecting it? Not really. They're not doing much, other than, well, it's not like Joe Biden got the deal he was pushing for. He also didn't get reelected because the college campus people didn't vote for him as much. So they did not have as much of a real effect. Certainly far less of a real effect than the pro-free speech protests at Berkeley or pro-civil rights movements all across the country. They had a real effect. This, not to be... I don't want to act like it's not important or act like it's not real to some extent or that it's not an issue, but certainly not affecting it in a way in which protests in the past had been able to actually affect things. And I think, obviously, also, I don't mean to, waffle about this point further on, but I think they understand, too, rationally, if they thought more about it, that they can't actually affect it the way they're doing, or what they're doing is not actually being the most effective, right? Are they writing letters to their congresspeople? Are they, going to the National Mall or something like that? No. They're just this college campus at this college, which is already liberal, well, probably most likely, right? Or who already supports Palestine, and whatever, or for the most part, yeah. So they're just sitting in a place where people already agree with their opinions, and maybe not obviously, to some extent. Not to say that they didn't vote for what they thought would have the solution, but I think some polling data showed people in college campus areas didn't vote for Joe Biden as much in this election. Just thought that was interesting. Sort of got off. I feel like if you stopped it maybe 10 minutes ago, you'd be chill. You'd be like, all right, that was a good video. Now, but thank you for, if anybody's seeing this, which I'm okay if nobody ever does, thanks. I had a good time. I think it's an interesting topic. I think the first part was good-ish. It was important. The last part, but I'm tired. Thank you. And again, I always like to hear what people say. What your ideas are. What do you think? I think that's certainly part of the reason I'm doing this, to hear what other people's opinions are. I think that Socratic dialogue is very important. So let me know. Adios. That was not adios.